afternoon and welcome to Tetewathá Partyline Talkshow. I'm your host, Len Stacy, and today is MCK Friday, and I will be joined actually by two chiefs today. Later on in the show, Chief Ross Montour will be joining us, but first up is Chief Lloyd Phillips, who's in a bit of a career change. 6 months on the job, and then we're off to something different now. I guess that's the easiest way to put it.
Yeah, in a nutshell, I guess that's the best way to put it. It's certainly a unique time in my life as an individual. I'm looking at it from an individual. It was decided to make a career change. An opportunity came up that I felt that looking in the long term, that it was something I felt I was a good fit for, something that I felt that I could contribute. The years of knowledge I built over the years, being on council and other places, to help benefit the community in a more focused area of public safety.
You and I talked off air, and I wasn't surprised about the job. I think more surprised at the timing of because you've only been a chief in council approximately 6 months, or give or take.
Yeah, give or take, yes.
Yeah, and I think part of it was, but the job itself. I mean, to me, you couldn't have a more tailor-made job. I've known you pretty much your whole life, so for me, I know your work with the fire department, working on all kinds of things, ambulance, the whole setting up different things on safety anyway. So for me, that part wasn't surprising.
I appreciate that, and it was just either fortunate or unfortunate timing, the way things played out. But in July, my focus was on being reelected into council and giving my contributions much as I can to the table and to the community. And then it was after the fact that this opportunity came up about, and I had to look at it from a community perspective, but ultimately my personal perspective at the end of the day, right? And I felt it was the best move for myself. And again, maybe timing wasn't the greatest, but I'm confident in the current council table that we have. Very strong table, very good people, and then whoever will be taking my seat, I'm sure they'll fit in well, and there's a good team in place already.
And I think one of the things, and something that's been different with all of the previous council tables, was the fact that there was a training transition orientation type thing, which I think made a little bit of a difference. Even, and you can answer this yourself, who's been on council several times before, and then coming into like this time, it was like you're prepared a little bit more than usual. I mean, you're still in the limelight at all levels of politics. That wasn't, but I thought again it was a good approach to help the chiefs get that hit the ground running kind of thing when you're ready to roll.
Yeah, and this year we did it differently. It was a more of a complete file review from head to toe on what the council was dealing with. So the new chiefs coming in had a good picture of what they're facing, and Ross could speak for himself, but I'm sure it was a fairly daunting experience to know what is being dealt with on a day-to-day basis. I mean, 90% of the stuff that council deals with never reaches the media, until it's maybe at the final steps or whatever. But there's a lot of work behind the scenes on a day-to-day basis, and that has to happen. That's being dealt with, whether it be on a community level, or organizational level, or individual level. There's always a lot of things happening. And obviously then there's the high profile files that everybody's aware of. So
in terms of your transition, what's going to happen in the next little while?
Well, I already had several meetings with Ron Sky, the Commissioner of Public Safety at the moment. We're doing some again file review on that specifically, on getting up to speed on the details of the job. I'm already fairly well versed on the overall relationship aspects and the big picture sort of things, but now to get more in depth in details, various contacts he has and stuff of that nature. So we're in that process now. We had a great meeting yesterday. We're meeting again a couple times in the next couple of weeks, and at the same time, as well as at council, looking at phasing out some of the responsibilities that I had, and ensuring that the portfolio teams that I was associated with are clear on the next steps there, or I have my last views, my opinions put in there, and then after end of the month, I officially start start on February 4th.
Oh, okay.
And then the transition will be complete. I'm still expecting another steep learning curve once you're really in the position. I mean, there's no really way to. You can be prepared as much as you want by reading and researching and stuff, but you have to really be immersed in it and take on the responsibility firsthand. And then there's still a steep learning curve, and I'm prepared. I'm prepared for that. But I'm also excited because there's a clean slate to a large extent because of Arnold Lazar's changing positions, Ron Sky leaving, have the opportunity to take a unit that's already built and move it to the next level and create a vision on where I think public safety should be for our community, and I'm looking forward to that.
And I'm sure there's a lot of work to be done. Ross?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make a comment with regard to Lloyd's new position and the position he's leaving as council chief. One of the things I was asked by the Eastern Door for my thoughts on it. One of the things is I really couldn't see a better or a stronger advocate for the needs of the community in terms of community safety and all the aspects that are there, because Lloyd has been involved intimately with all of those things, either from a frontline service provider, the ambulance service, fire brigade, and from the council side as a liaison to PKs. So he knows what the needs are, and so really he's going to continue interfacing with the council table and a strong advocacy, maybe more so than when he was sitting at the table. Mind you, there was a certain sense of, at least on my part personally, when I knew he was going to be making the decision, and I encouraged him to make the decision that he felt was, in the best needs of the community and himself. I sort of said, well, okay, now that's a big hole at the table. But there are, as he mentioned, there are, and whether I'm part of that or not, there are a lot of strong people at the table, so that Lloyd moving won't cripple the table. And in terms, we'll have a by-election, and then we'll proceed from there. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, it's a decision that I support Lloyd making, in the best interest of the community, and for Lloyd too.
And thank you, Ross. I certainly appreciate that, and I read your comments you made to the Eastern Door, and I certainly appreciate that. And the majority of the council members, chiefs, have expressed similar sentiments. So I appreciate that. And out in the community, staff and just at the post a little while ago, people congratulating me and wishing me best of luck, and they understand the situation. And like I said, if I was leaving the community totally and not being involved, and it may have been a totally different decision. But I'm still actively involved and continue on the work that I've been doing. And you're just
maybe going to a new building, to be honest, if it comes down to that. And it's not like you said, like you're not leaving the community.
Exactly.
So you're still going to be a resource.
Yeah, and like Ross said, it's still interfacing with council, still advocating, and like I said, I have opportunity to focus my attention on public safety issues, and
that's a big undertaking, because I'm assuming emergency preparedness and all of that falls under that.
Yeah, it's emergency preparedness and the administrative oversight of the peacekeepers and relationships with the fire brigade. There's a bunch of elements that are there that really are already existing in a concrete way, but there's also ways of having a plan to ensure that all the resources in the community are going in the same direction.
Yes.
Working collaboratively on many levels to ensure, again, ultimately various levels of public safety are addressed, and what areas need to be expanded upon, and sometimes modified or changed. Right.
Right. Well, thank you so much, and we wish you good luck. We're at our break time, so I just want to wish you good luck on your job. I know I'll be seeing you because Ron used to pop in every now and then as well, so
no problem.
You're not off the hook from K1037
No.
at Tetewathá.
All right, I think you appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yawa.
Welcome back to Tetewathá Partyline Talkshow. I'm your host, Luann Stacey, and today is MCK Friday, and I'm joined by Chief Ross Montour and Chief Lloyd Phillips. For the remainder of the show, I kind of wanted to focus a little bit about what's going on in British Columbia, and the reason for it, because today there was a lot of action. We had, I think one of the things was the rolling roadblock, and I really thought that was a powerful thing that was going across the 401 highway in different sectors. You know, some people from our community went and joined, and you know,
I understood it was from Cornwall going on.
Yeah, and I thought that was pretty cool. And then other people took up different parts. They went as far as Tyendinaga, then someone else was taking it a little further on. And the way I knew it was going to be continuing with different groups of people. And I guess for us as a community, I know we always think that 1990 is gone, but every time something like this happens, my blood pressure goes right back up, and I get upset, and you know, it rehashes a lot of different things. So I wanted to talk a little bit, you know, how it comes from a council perspective, us as a community, and what are the things that we can do. You know, different people have spoken up. The Haudenosaunee External Relations Committee sent out a statement yesterday. Different band councils have sent a statement. So I'd like to hear from your perspective of what's going on. Ross?
Yeah, no, the other day, I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, I mean, one of the things that we did was we recognized the seriousness of what had occurred in British Columbia, and the problem there with I'll use the term, a highly militarized RCMP incursion into there to remove, arrest defenders of people of their own territory.
Right.
I mean, that's I think the worst part of it is that those are people who have taken a principled stand about the construction of a gas pipeline moving through their traditional Aboriginal territory. And you know, the challenge to me, I mean, 1990 will always be there.
Right.
But, you know, the way I'll look at that, we'll say, well, the more things change, the more they stay the same as it ever was. And, you know, when we talk about, say, external relations, say, at the council table, we're talking about, okay, so we have, say, a new government in Quebec. Who are they? How are they going to interface with us now? What are the challenges? We're going to have to start back at square one and educate a new government. We went through something like 10, 12 years of the Harper government, and at you know, relations at its most dysfunctional, and then the promise of a new way of moving forward, which seems so bright at the outset for many people. And then you start to look at it and you say, well, has it really changed? Has it really changed? If you start talking about reconciliation, if you start talking about a recognition, and then you say, well, we have to go in because it's the rule of law. Well, how real then is your commitment to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People? How sincere are your statements about recognition and reconciliation? And you have to say, well, you know what, you kind of fumbled the ball here. And so, where the Prime Minister the other day was out in BC. Talking about, you know, the strides that they've made, and with regard to, you know, a cleaner environment or what have you, and you start talking about rule of law, you know, you have to look at that and you say, you got an F there.
Really?
An F minus. So sorry, Prime Minister. And so what we talked about was a statement in terms of getting out ahead of it. And we will be discussing it again on Monday at the council table about how we proceed. Because at one point, it triggered a meeting. Okay, and all the discussion about two-road, because that's the continuing issue for just for us dealing at the Kahnawake Canada table. Okay, is how they want to interpret what two-road means to them versus the reality of it to us is quite different. Okay, and in order for it to be real, they have to accept our view of that. You know, otherwise it's just kind of an exercise in my personal view. I don't want to speak for the whole table, okay? But it's an exercise in futility then. So we will be discussing the British Columbia situation further, because even though, see, what happened is there was sort of an agreement to say allow for them to go in and conduct certain work, but that doesn't resolve the issue at all.
And I think one of the things I've had in the past, actually the past year and a half, I've had several chiefs who had been on here talking about the environment, the pipeline. Last year, there was, the movement that was happening in the Dakotas, and it's like we're promising on one hand 2019's International Year of Indigenous Languages. We're talking truth and reconciliation. One province is saying, we messed up, we're going to do this, and here you are in BC, and there you see 14 people getting arrested, and you can't help it, but it brings up again, what is he saying? What is the Prime Minister promising? Don't promise you're going to do all these things because your actions don't speak the same thing.
No, you know what I would encourage anybody. I've been reading was Arthur Manuel's last book before he passed away. It's called Reconciliation Manifesto, and that is a really important book to read, because here we're talking about what constitutes real reconciliation. One of the things we have to realize, and what Canada needs to realize, they have an institutionalized poverty in First Nations, and one of the key aspects to that has to do with the fact that it's something like 0.1% of the land is really under Aboriginal title, and everything else is claimed to be under Crown title, and so they control almost the totality of land and the resources on the land and so on. So you can talk about the lack of access to economic means through resources on the land, or even to say, we're against this because we're deeply concerned about the environment. That's our role as Indigenous people. And that's something, they're talking about in British Columbia, but that's inherent to the Tetewathá of our own people. It's that profound responsibility to the environment. And I think more and more, the challenges to the federal government, it's got to be more than words. The federal government just went through a court case out west in BC where they were told by the Supreme Court that, consultation is more than taking down notes and doing what you please. In the end. And so those things, they have to be challenged at a fundamental level, I believe.
You're listening to Tetewathá, Partyline Talk Show. My guest in studio with me for MCK Friday are Chief Lloyd Phillips and Chief Ross Montour. Lloyd, you had something you wanted to add? Yeah,
exactly what Ross was saying in terms of actions speak louder than words, and you have to really start showing results, based on the words that you've been saying, or Trudeau's, pre-election, and once he was elected, and he made great promises, and like I said, people were hopeful. Okay, maybe here we can make some significant changes, and many First Nations bought into that. Because after 12 years of Harper, here's something that we could make some major changes, and. For the first, going to many AFN meetings in the first couple of years, really, when Trudeau would go there and he would do a speech, and he would be welcome. Almost like at one point it was almost like a rock star entrance. He'd come in and everybody wants to get a selfie with him, and they're clapping and applauding, standing ovation, and but you see that changing now, because these speeches sound great and they make people feel empowered, and you feel like positive. But then over time now, even this past, I was in Ottawa in early December. He came in and he had a speech, and it was nothing like, his reception was nothing like it was 2 years prior. He had some very tough questions being asked of him, and he took very few questions, because I gotta go. So he took only a handful of questions, and then sorry, my schedule doesn't allow me to stay any longer, and then he left. So that speaks volumes. And more First Nations across the country are realizing that it's only words, and when questioned hard on some of the points, like it's been the standard government line, including Trudeau and others, they start quoting financial numbers. Oh, we put 1.5 billion towards fresh water. We put this amount of money for education. We put this money there. So it goes far beyond dollars and cents. No, it's about Aboriginal rights and title, Indigenous rights and title. It's about recognition, and true reconciliation. That's what it's about. No, it's not only about dollars and cents. No, that's a far second.
And I think one of it, and I think Ross made a point about it, is the environment. And I think the bottom line to this is that they're thinking dollars and cents, while the Aboriginal people are actually thinking environment, water. I mean, those are important things. Without any of that, we've got nothing.
I'll tell you, one of my portfolios is Indigenous Rights and Research, the duty to consult. And so I've been functioning at this level over the last 6 months, and more my impression, and I say it at the tables where we meet with people like from the DFO, Department of Fisheries and Oceans, Ministry of Transport, and so on, is that I'm not a marine biologist, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a whatever it may be. It could be archaeology, on archaeology, but this thing about consultation is it's just only a checkbox exercise where you say, well, okay, you people want to be consulted. Okay, here, so we're proponents send you these requests, for you. Can you consult? Number one, do you have the capacity to? Do you have the expertise when you want to? And even if you do you follow through and do you implement and insert any of the suggestions that we make in that consultation process into how you end up doing things? And for me, like if you start talking about recognition, I'll take a different view about how money is used. Oftentimes, and that's a concern and a critique that's been advanced in some quarters about where AFN is going in terms of the dollars that are being channeled by the federal government into. You could say, well, we're committed this much to education, or we're committed to this and that. But are they steering an agenda? Are they using the national organization to achieve an agenda on how they will interpret how our governance in the future, our self-determination will be recognized? No, it'll be this way under Canadian Constitution. UNDRIP will be defined under the Canadian Constitution. And does that really, there's a disconnect. That's what I'm going to say, period. And that's a great concern. It's growing across the country. So I watched a short little video about Trudeau at a community meeting where he's trying to talk about how good things are, and he was being challenged, and he was floundering. He was there, and he was struggling with the audience who were challenging him on things having to do with recognition and reconciliation as it relates to the last few days.
But I think it's an interesting thing, and both of you have been around politics long enough to know that it's actually a positive sign if you look at it, because before, years and years, most First Nations people wouldn't challenge in health, wouldn't challenge in education, wouldn't challenge at AFN. AFN was the end-all be-all. Years later, we're finding that's not the case.
Yeah.
And as a people across the country, people are starting to stand up. So for me, I take that as a positive thing. But, it's not perfect, but at least people aren't waiting 10 years when a government's been in place, if you look at, the Harper government.
Yeah, you're right. I guess there's a silver lining in anything you could try to find, right? Because historically, as you know, Luann, in your like health phase, as an example, Kahnawake was one of the few communities across Canada who were challenging the status quo, challenging the policies and the laws and so on. And it took a long time that other Mohawk communities and other communities start getting on board and challenging them. But now, if you see it, on a larger national level, that more and more communities are standing up and challenging, the way things are being done. It's ultimately it's a positive thing for First Nations, but it's a major challenge at the same time.
Absolutely, and I think one of the things when you look at this, and again, a little bit heartwarming, and I'm trying not to always look as it's just a ray of sunshine. I'm very clear on what's going on, but at the same time, when I look at it, when just this rolling roadblock You know, each buddy taking up a piece of it. To me, the message of that is that we don't need to do the whole thing. We do our part, and across the country, people are going to get involved. And to me, that's a very strong message to the government. You know,
and hopefully they're going to listen.
Yeah.
And it's more than it's more than listening.
Yeah.
It's acting on the message, okay, in a positive way that takes seriously the concerns of people. And you know what, you talk about what's going on today with the rolling roadblock.
Yeah.
I mean, the other day there were 50 demonstrations across not just Canada, but it
Yes.
also. I know there was one in Minnesota.
Yeah.
So it went into the United States in terms of the support. So that's, to me, is a really, really positive outcome. I mean, we responded to the people in North Dakota
Yes.
with the pipeline issue. People were captured from the Mohawk Council, but also community members. The Longhouse went. So there was a kind of a unified statement of support that was coming from this side. And you know, at border, we talk about that. We talk about our border rights and everything else. That border is not supposed to be our border. It's supposed to be like 10 feet over our head. Okay. And we know, I mean, I understand, you know, there's issues with security and so on. But we face those things all the time, and sometimes I think we separate ourselves. And over time, you know, like there's people on the American side versus the Canadian side. But this is unifying Indigenous people throughout Turtle Island to say, you know what, that's wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. However you do it on this side of the line, you know, it's wrong. There has to be a better way, and we're a part of the solution. We are the solution.
Because I think you're right. It's hard with the government because they've decided here's the game plan and we're just going to do it. You know, and for years most communities haven't done much of anything. You're right. This community's always been kind of fighters for everything. It didn't matter what. You know, we didn't wait for somebody to tell us how to do or what to do or whatever. You know, we've always had very strong leadership in probably every single sector.
Yep.
And been leaders in a lot of this. So, you know, that's what I'm wondering. How does this impact us as a community? You know, and given our relationships with other governments, provincial and federal governments, and, you know, even locally to other communities, because there are impacts, even though it is in BC.
Yeah, I could assure you that it's what's happening is being watched very closely by the outside, and probably even listening to what we're saying at this moment. And you know, and if you look at it from a positive perspective, maybe they're realizing more and more. I mean, look, yeah, we may have something happening, you know, a few thousand miles, you know, west of here, but the principle of it is across the country, and they see more and more that the First Nations are going to stand together based on some common principles, and then the government has a problem.
Yeah.
And I would add to what Lloyd was saying, characterize it this way: their battle is our battle. Okay, we are. You know what? One of the people that could have been sitting here today is Chief Harry Rice, who, by the way, has a son. Okay, who is also a member of one of the nations over there, and part of the hereditary system over there, will carry at some point a title over there. So from one end of this longhouse to another, okay, it is our battle. Their battle is our battle.
And I think you're pointing out we have several other community members with ties to that community, and some are friends, some are family members. You know, Jamie Kirby has family out there. Bobby D has friends that are out there right within that community and actually lived out there. So, you know, the connections for us, I don't think there's ever been a boundary, whether it was province, state, or country. That's never one of our issues, you know?
If you just look, say, recently, the issue of hunting and fishing rights has come up. And if you look at the history of Kahnawake, okay, in the Great Peace of 1701, one of the outcomes of that was this idea, this metaphor of one dish, one spoon. Okay, and that's how we achieve peace with all of the other nations in what was then. I mean, it wasn't Quebec. Okay, it was whether it was New France, what have you. Okay, is that okay? Where we hunt, they hunt, we all share from the same table in the environment, and we're not going to shed blood over those things. So there was a unity of purpose that had the outcome of peace. Okay, and so that's the principle that we have to always adhere to, in my own view. And I don't think anybody could dispute that.
No, they can't. You're listening to K1037, Tetewathá, Partyline Talkshow. And welcome back to Tetewathá Partyline Talk Show. I'm your host, Lance Stacy, and today is MCK Friday, and I'm joined by Chief Ross Montour and Chief Lloyd Phillips, and we're talking about what is actually going on in BC with our brothers and sisters, and the RCMP raids, and the Trudeau government, and the approach that his taking or not taking. I'm not sure, pending which way you want to look at it. What is MCK planning on doing in terms of supporting? We know some community members took the ride out this morning. We know different people have written letters. People on social media are supporting, retweeting, resending, and keeping, trying to become involved. So I'm wondering, what is MCK going to do, and then what are we looking to do as a community?
So again, the day after the RCMP went in, we had a meeting. It started out with an informal meeting. Lloyd was a part of that discussion about what we needed to do to get out in front of this, and we needed to make some kind of a statement in support of the people out there. But also putting the government on notice about what our concerns were about that, and so we embarked to write a letter, or actually it started out as a release, okay. And because the situation kind of changed, it sort of de-escalated for a little bit. It was sort of like decided, well, okay, we'll take a brief pause on this and bring this back to the table. Because whether we went to a press release on it or not, with regard to what we were writing the other day, it doesn't rule out, and it doesn't do away with, I think, a need to communicate with the Minister of Justice, Jody Wilson-Raybould, the Prime Minister, Carolyn Bennett, and anybody else who falls on it. There's a whole list of Canadian politicians, our displeasure and our dissatisfaction with the approach that was taken out there. I mean, to us, the situation is in that sector of British Columbia. You have a situation where the government says, well, you know what? We negotiated with 5 band councils, okay, and we know we're intimately aware in Kahnawake about that whole issue about band council versus traditional and so on. So, but they have it too, and they hold a position that is that the hereditary, the people are the rights holders and not elected councils. Okay, but the added to that is the issue of any given community out there that's represented by the government recognizes elected councils, band councils, however you want to call it. Okay, they all have particular needs, and sometimes what I'm afraid of is that money is used to coerce acceptance of things. Now, the other people, the defenders of the land, and the hereditary chiefs. So there were 5 band council chiefs versus, if you will, 5 hereditary chiefs, but then the people. Okay, so we didn't want to say go and interfere over there and say, well, we're taking this side over that side. And the only side we're taking is that the government did the wrong thing.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So so come Monday morning, that will be addressed at the table, because that still, I think, is a necessary statement to be made, because it's going to be, you talk about what's going on over there, and it will be coming up at our own tables,
Because it's a natural thing to happen. Once you shake the government shakes, then somewhere along the line, it's going to happen. Something's going to happen here or something down the road. And we've always been monitoring, what is happening across the country.
Yeah, I mean that's part of the responsibility of the table as well. And OCC, and to keep an eye on the landscape. Because like I said, even if something's happening in a different part of the country, the principles that behind it, whether it be a indigenous principle or whether it be a government principle or law in which they're using, that is something that goes across coast to coast, and we have to be aware of that, and how it's being dealt with in other areas of the country could impact us and it will impact us one way or another sooner or later.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and especially because we're talking resources and, the pipeline, oil, money, bottom line.
Yeah.
So eventually they're going to cut some string somewhere. And Ross, you said it, usually that's where it's going to come. Something will affect something, or we're going to give you this, but at the same time, we're cutting you in 3 other areas. That's how the government works. It's not new money.
Yeah. The old saying, they're taking from Peter to give to Paul, right?
Yep, absolutely.
But again, if you tie that to land, and the issue of title, okay, that template is being used wherever you go, from east to west. I'm getting a little distracted by.
Yeah, sorry. It sounded weird. Okay.
Yeah, no, so that template is being used across the board. Okay, and may say, well, it's a little bit different here, it's a little bit different, but it isn't. And one of the things that I think we have to keep our eye on is that if the government's view of how I believe they eventually want to see recognition come about on their terms has to do with it's not about recognizing true self-determination. It's not about Aboriginal title. And in fact, it's talking about municipalization of lands. It's about a fee simple land ownership and those kinds of things, taxation. And you look at some of the agreements that have been made in British Columbia. And I often wonder how did they arrive at even approaching that? It just seems here would be anathema, to even think like that. I mean, it comes up all the time. I mean, we get accused that we're bringing in taxation from time to time, as opposed to trying to meet the needs of the community, So, but that's we have to sort of, I think, challenge the sincerity of the government always. And to do otherwise, I think, is underestimating I'll call it a threat.
Yeah, because I think right now they haven't come through on the things that were being promised. We talk about reconciliation and we talked about all these other things, and so far you got little snippets of it, but overall the picture, it's still, in my opinion, the same result.
Yeah, because when you talk about reconciliation, I mean, I guess everybody has a slightly different interpretation of what that means, but a lot of it comes down to recognition of Aboriginal or Indigenous title to land, and allowing for the true self-determination of Indigenous communities or nations. To me, that's in a nutshell right there, because if you have that recognition and they vacate the field, so to speak, and they make that room in their legislation to allow that to happen. No, there's more than enough resources out there. Absolutely. In terms of if it's a dollars and cents issue, we're more than capable, and Indigenous people are more than capable of creating enough revenue to sustain their communities with the proper exercising of their rights. It can be done, and there is an opportunity for call it a win-win between Indigenous peoples and Canada. I mean, they're not going nowhere, unfortunately, and either are we. So find a way to coexist. Again, back to the whole 2 wampum concept. To really have it that put into place, and it creates peace. It creates and prosperity for everybody. And if you keep it in the same way we're going now, everybody loses eventually, because we're not advancing our rights. We're subjugated to various laws, and they can't advance their agenda as well, because they're being held back by Indigenous individuals and nations.
I think one of the things on this issue, I was reading on larger media outlets that now some Hollywood stars are jumping on this. So how big it's gotten when you have someone like Susan Sarandon jumping. This has been her baby in every single area. But again, today there was a protest somewhere in the States, and I don't remember what city exactly, but there she was. So people are taking and aren't waiting this time. We're not wait and see.
Mm-hmm.
People are being proactive, and let's get something done.
Yeah, because I think more and more people are realizing now the linkages between what Indigenous people have been saying for forever, and the global warming and the environmental issues that have been happening, and climate change and all this stuff. It's all coming to a head, and people are finally realizing, saying, no, what they've been saying for all these years is true, and we see impacts day-to-day basis. So more and more people are standing behind it. From that perspective, as well as people supporting Aboriginal rights.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit speechless because I'm thinking about the relationship that we have and the promises that are made and the language that's used versus what happens. Ultimately, I think on the ground. Again, to that question of always having to challenge and always, one of the things that we've discussed at the table really is that when we had a discussion about the future of our relationship to the KCR table, the Kahnawake Canada table, okay, and there's been a battle over the use of the word the two-row principle over, and you can just get the sense that the government wants to walk around that like something they don't want to have to go through. They can find another way to talk about it, which is fundamentally not the reality of what that speaks to. And that's the rub, as far as I'm concerned. So the challenge again, we have to be prepared to keep pushing at that. Okay, because otherwise they will decide for us. They'll decide in terms of who's on. I was thinking about S3 as an example.
Yes, the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're going to continue to create and fabricate under the Indian Act a new criteria for who they're going to put on a list versus our own. And it doesn't matter, whether or not people on that list say are drawing directly from the well here in terms of entitlements and so on. But eventually that'll be used as a rationale to continue to cut and push individual First Nations into accepting agreements whereby, things like diminished resources are there and still say they're keeping up the fiduciary responsibilities, but you have own source revenue and so on, and really, it's like eventually, you can't lose sight of the land.
Yeah.
Okay? So when I say we're going to the scenery, we're going to settle the scenery. What's a just settlement of that? The government has its own view, and that's about we're going to settle this out with dollars. Okay, that doesn't begin to address it. No. There has to be a just way. Again, I think, I got my own 50 years of thinking about this, 40-something years. I remember in the late 60s, that one of the first Trudeau brought forth this idea of a just society, okay? And then came out with the white paper. And then Harold Cardinal wrote a book. It was called The Unjust Society. And so we're not unaware, but again, what I was talking about earlier is that we have to challenge is that, okay, so the more the things that change, the more they stay the same. Do they think that we have forgotten? If you look at the Defenders of the Land in British Columbia now, and you will see a lineage there going back to George Emanuel, the foundation of the National Indian Brotherhood, and then later on his son's involvement, and then Arthur's children involved, and they are the ones who are out there on the front lines. Okay, they're the ones being arrested. They're the ones being confronted by the RCMP. So really, have we even? Is there really a real dedication on the part of the governments? Okay, to talk about what a just society is for us.
And I think that's a good way to end, because that's a good question, and we could go on and on this, but it's the truth, because what are they promising? What are they saying? But I think we as First Nations people are getting smarter and smarter, and I know across the country we have different political views and different things, but I think that gap is starting to close, where people are really starting to take a look at, there's more to this than just what the government's making promises for.
Oh, definitely. There has to be truth and reconciliation, right?
Absolutely.
And more and more people are idle no more.
Yeah. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for coming in. It was a great discussion. Went fast, of course. Thank you so much, Lloyd. Good luck with the
Thank you very
new
much.
job. Coming up Monday, Tetewathá is going to have a new segment called Kahnawake Achievers, and we'll be interviewing a variety of Kahnawake Ronu on different accomplishments. And my first one is actually going to be Judge Ganetario Gilbert, and I'm very excited about that.
Me too.
And so we'll see our new segment on Monday. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Busy weekend in our community. Up with the 1 o'clock news is Kathleen Speckard, Onigiwahi.